Welcome to Carl and Heather Present,
the podcast where we dive into the insights, challenges, and humor of being married to someone who is nothing like you.
Are you ready?
Let's go.
Oh, don't you know it's Carl and Heather Present Marriage Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. Carl and Heather Present Big Time Hit Podcast, which I'm referring to it now as that. It's
Okay.
a big time hit podcast. Our team of researchers and data analysts from the Carl and Heather Present Institute have recently submitted a quarterly report that allowed us to know that Carl and Heather Present is now being heard in over 15 countries.
Wow.
I am happy to report that we now have an international audience.
Wow.
What a distinction, right?
I love it.
Carl and Heather Present, we're going global.
Do you know any of the countries, like specifically, what's one that you're like, this is, because I'd think like, the UK or something like that might be normal.
UK was in there. Canada was in there.
Okay.
A lot of Latin American countries.
Okay.
Get this, Indonesia.
Oh, okay.
The Republic of Laos.
Okay. Wow.
I don't even know what language they speak
gonna say,
there.
who knows?
You know what they do, though? They speak Carl and Heather Present.
Well, there you go.
I would
love it.
like to thank the Carl and Heather Present Institute and the team of scientists and researchers that work there for getting that information to us in a timely way. We want to support our team. We want
Right.
to encourage those guys.
Right.
They're doing and girls. They're doing a good job.
That guy and girl. I mean, guys and girls.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go.
Well, welcome everybody. It's
Yep.
been going good.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah.
We are wrapping up we're wrapping up a couple things. We had spring break a couple weeks ago with our family, which was awesome.
Yep.
Everybody was home. College spring break with our oldest lined up with school spring break, high school, middle school spring break. That was great. We were all home together. And we were also in the middle of a social media, really media fast with our church. And it was hard at first, but then it was awesome. And we're wrapping that up. And so we're going to talk about that next week. But I think it was great.
Yeah.
It was really, really helpful and very insightful for me. And so anyway, we'll talk about that. How about you? How are you doing?
Well, shout out to our church.
Yeah.
Church of the City in
Yeah.
Franklin, Tennessee. That's where we go to church. We're new to that church, but we love going to church there.
Yeah.
And they're good folks.
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah. I have been traveling a lot.
You have.
And you've been traveling with me, though.
have.
We've been speaking at a lot of events. You and I love to speak at the Weekend to Remember events that we talk about here on the podcast. We also love to speak at our own Carl and Heather events where, if a church brings us in to talk about marriage stuff, it's so fun to do. And we love to do that. If you are interested in something like that, reach out to us at carlandheather.com. We would love to come and minister at your church, to your marriage group,
Yeah.
your small group, your church, to do a weekend, anything like that. We love doing it. So
Yeah.
it's good.
That's great. And we've got some feedback, right?
We did have some feedback. We've had some feedback from some of these events we've been speaking at. So we just wanted to say these are what some people have said about the events we've been speaking at. So this is kind of like listener comments,
Yeah.
but from the attendees of these conferences. So number one, husband from married 20 years says, huge impact. Returned us back to husband and wife and not just roommates. It opened the lines of communication to help us become more intimate and show affection. A wife married 18 years says, my husband prayed with me for the first time. We're both in therapy, and this was one of his biggest obstacles that he had. So cool.
I love that.
And a wife married 11 years says, we were on a slippery slope of losing everything we've built over 10 years of marriage. Things were bad when we came to this event. We finally talked about our issues instead of yelling or ignoring each other. So it's cool stuff, beautiful stuff to hear. It's
Yeah.
great to hear feedback. If you've got any feedback for us on the podcast, please let your voice be heard. Please let us know how it's going, how the podcast is impacting you. Make a comment on social media or on YouTube or on Facebook or Instagram. let us know through hi@carlandheather.com is the email address that you can communicate with us. We would just love to know. And rate, comment, like, subscribe, all the things you're supposed to do on all the platforms. It really does help us out, and it helps more people find out more about this ministry.
Right. Yep. That's right. That's right.
Okay, so last week we talked about my buddies, and I asked them, what's the best piece of marriage advice, or what's a piece of advice you wish somebody would have told you before you got married?
Yep.
And so this week we're doing the same thing, except for with your girlfriends.
Yep.
So I call my buddies my buddies.
Yeah.
What do you call your girls?
I call them my girlfriends.
Your girlfriends?
You don't call them boyfriends. It's we won't get into that, but like,
Yeah, I don't do that.
You don't do that, but they're my girlfriends.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you asked your girlfriends a very similar question. You said, what's one piece of advice you wish someone would have given you before you were married? And you got some feedback. You got some girlfriends chiming in. Let's get into it.
Okay.
Okay, so the first one,
Okay.
good piece of marriage advice.
Right.
Don't talk to your mom, family, dad about your marriage issues once you're married.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, this one's tricky for me. I don't know how to do
Right.
this one.
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on your family of origin. Some people would say, I didn't talk about my issues with them before I was married. So I'm not going to go. So those people would be like, it's a non-issue for me. But if you were close with your family and you talked about a lot of things and you talked about marriage ahead of time, it would be really easy if you were like a mama's boy or a daddy's girl to go back, or you're best friends with your mom or really tight with your dad, to go back when you're having issues and talk with your family of origin, mom and dad, about issues that you're having. Now, they are going to most likely defer to you first, meaning not your spouse, right?
They didn't like your spouse to begin with. They're like, I knew this wouldn't
Not
work.
true.
I'm just kidding.
What my friend who submitted this question said, though, which I thought was very insightful, is that her dad sat them down. This was a girlfriend of mine, and her dad sat them down and said, if you have marriage problems, you can come to us as a couple. You cannot come to us individually, and you can talk about problems that you're having together, but not separate.
Wow.
And I love that way, because it's not, we're cutting you off. We don't know anything about issues that we're having. We're sharing these, but that idea of the two shall become one flesh really played out in that.
That sounds like a good piece of fathering.
Yes.
Right there.
Absolutely.
Whoever that dad was,
Yeah.
we won't out him on the podcast, but good job, Dad.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good piece of fathering.
Right.
You can talk to us about this, but only as a couple.
Right. Together.
Dang.
I thought it was good.
Puts a little heat on everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are other, it's
Yeah.
not to say you don't talk about it with people.
That's right.
It's just you choose the people you talk with it about, and go to your, if you have wise counsel and your parents, what a blessing.
Yeah.
And go to them as a couple. Talk with them as a couple.
Okay.
Yep.
So don't talk to your marriage and family about issues once you're married. There's some nuance and subtlety.
Yeah.
It's like, don't be gossipy about your spouse.
Right. Yeah.
I love
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So,
Well, look, wow. All right. That was a good one to start with. Your next friend said this: in arguments, I ask myself, will this matter in 5 years? If it won't, I let it go.
yeah. This is a friend of mine who's been married for 50 years, 50 plus years. So I think that is pretty insightful. I think the newlywed would be like, I can't even think about 5 years. So you could probably even say 5 days.
Yeah.
Will this matter in 5 days or 5 weeks or 5 months? But
Yeah.
she has a lot more wisdom to offer because of the longevity. And I think it's, hindsight is 2020. You can look back and say, man, I wish I wouldn't have put all my eggs in this basket or made such a big deal about these things when you
Yeah.
have 50 years of experience.
Yeah.
We did an episode early on conflict when we first started the podcast. And so I think that one is a good one to listen to, but we're actually doing an episode in a couple weeks on unforgiveness. And I'm excited about that one too, because I think sometimes either unhealthy conflict or we don't handle conflict well, or even we nitpick about things. You had you said this before and you'll say it again, is that like, just don't be petty about small things. But then when there are things that need to be resolved, resolve them in a healthy way. Don't avoid conflict, but engage in conflict in a healthy way where you're not damaging each other with conflict. And then when, like in this case, when there are things that like, does this matter? It doesn't matter. I'm not going to like harp on this. I'm going to let this go because you and I both know we've been married long enough. The things that were cute about us when we first got married can be our biggest annoyances with each other.
Yeah.
When you start living together and you're married, So I think you just got to learn to let some things go. I think that's good advice.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah.
All right. We're keeping going here, kids. What's one piece of advice you wish someone had given you before you were married? I wish I'd known that my husband couldn't complete me or make me whole.
Yeah.
I wish I'd known that my husband couldn't complete me or make me whole.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think
Is that good advice?
I think it's great advice because I don't know. I'd be curious to know, first of all, if men feel this way, because I do think I've talked to a lot of my girlfriends who would say, I think that there were things broken about me that I came into my marriage and I was thinking that my husband could help fix those things or he could complete, think about that. Is it Jerry Maguire where that famous line of "you complete me," where he says that "you complete me"? I don't know that that's true. That's romanticized love.
Isn't that Austin Powers?
It's not.
I thought he says it to Mini-Me.
No. Well, yeah, he's calling back to Jerry Maguire.
I think it's
And
original.
Renee Zellweger, because he says, "You complete me," and then she says, "You had me at hello."
I just think Austin Powers was first.
I was actually reading that in a book too, where they had quoted about that. Anyway, all that to say, you don't complete me and I don't complete you. God does that. And we've said this before that like every marriage at some point will be disappointing because we weren't made for marriage. We were made for God. And so if I go into this marriage thinking I have these broken pieces of me, and we all do. So you'll come into marriage, there are parts of you that are broken. If you're looking to me to fix those things, to complete those things, to fill those voids or those gaps or those holes that I have in my heart, it will be, or that you have in your heart, it will be very disappointing to you because only God can do that. And the idea, another one of my friends also said kind of something similar, is that she wished someone would have told her that two halves don't make a whole.
Right.
And this goes back to that idea that we talked about last week of contract versus covenant. Like in a contract, your half and my half together make a whole. That's a
Right.
good thing.
Yeah.
In a covenant, I bring all of myself. I bring 100% of myself. You bring 100% of yourself. It's not a contract. It's a covenant. I'm all in. I'm giving everything, whether you do or not. And so the idea that you can fix something that's broken in me if I come to marriage does not work. In fact, I think marriage exacerbates the broken parts of us. It shines a light on it.
Oh, yeah.
And you even said this, I think, last week, that it's more like instead of a spotlight, it's more like an x-ray.
Yeah.
Because we've got these, things that are wrong with us that people can see, but your spouse gets to see the inside parts of you that are broken. And when we get married and you marry the second most selfish person that you know,
Yeah.
right? First person being yourself, those things kind of come to light. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. We look at, a lot of times, sometimes we go to people that have a history of going from relationship to relationship because they like to rescue things in people. But
That's true.
It's kind of a fool's errand when it's like, if you're drowning, you first need to realize I'm the one that needs help.
Yeah.
Like we talked about, working on drawing a circle around yourself and working on the person in the circle.
Yep.
I think I love to help each other, and if you're falling down, I want to help pick you up.
Sure.
But that's not my identity. My
Right.
identity is not to rescue you.
Right.
Or like if I fixed you, then I'm a success.
Yeah.
That's not
Right.
good. Yeah.
Right. That's true.
All
That's
right.
true. So
Well, I wish I'd known my husband couldn't complete me or
Yep.
make me whole.
That's right.
Well, that's a good piece. If you're thinking about getting married,
yeah.
don't get married for that.
Right. That's right.
Whoever you are. Next one, this person says, every marriage is different, which sounds like saying the sky is blue unless
Right.
you finish it out. And that says, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
Every marriage is different. Comparison is the thief of joy. Tell me what she means.
Yeah. Well, when we got married, I think this is a personal example.
Is your friend Aristotle by chance? Sounds very, very philosophical.
I have some really smart friends, so
Yeah, you
surround
do.
yourself
You
with,
do.
with really people who are better than you, and you'll rise up. So, every marriage is different. Comparison is the thief of joy. Is this idea that we look at marriage, and I remember we did this when we first got married. We had some real struggles, and I find that not everybody does. You don't have to go into it being like, this is just going to be so hard. I talked to a girl this past weekend, and she was like, our first year has been amazing, and I celebrate that. But not everybody's story is that, and so ours was not that. We had probably one of our most difficult of the 26 years so far. One of our most difficult, wouldn't you say, is year one?
Year one.
Year one.
For sure.
Very difficult. However, I looked at all of my friends and what I thought their lives looked like, and I thought, why can't my life be like this? I also felt pretty isolated that I couldn't talk about it because everybody would ask me, how you like being married? Don't you just love it? I mean, almost like this expectation. Same thing with being a mom when you first have a kid. Like, don't you just, how you doing? Don't you just love being a mom? And nobody wants to hear you say, I hate it.
Yeah.
Wish I wouldn't have done this. That kind of thing. Or it's just terrible. Everybody wants to hear you say, it's great.
Would you think that marriage is sort of like social media in the way that the outward facing version of it, everyone wants it to be slick and
Right.
filtered and buttoned up
Yep.
and the appearance of happiness.
Sure.
But the reality of it is under the
Right.
waters. It's like you compare yourself to someone on social media
Right.
and you think, oh, this person is, they've got this fabulous life and
Yeah.
they're fit and they have all these friends and all of this stuff. But it's propped up. It's
Yeah.
not real.
Right. Yeah. And that's it. I mean, that's it with that one.
A lot of times we're comparing ourselves to an illegitimate standard.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and the reality is too, I will say this, I've heard this phrase before that the grass is greener on the other side because they water it and fertilize it. And so then there's also this idea of what have you sown into your marriage? Everything's not as it seems. And if you look back over what you've sown over the last 5 years, 5 days, 5 months, are you reaping the fruit of what you've sown? And if you're not, then look at what you're sowing and move forward and do something different.
Right.
So yeah.
Good one. What do you wish somebody would have told you before you got married? This girlfriend said something that I really think is sharp.
Yep.
Purity, innocence is different than purity, ignorance. Purity, innocence is different than purity, ignorance. Now, I do need you to explain what she means.
Yeah, okay. So some of you might not remember what we call the purity culture, and that's what you and I grew up with. And that was this idea there were rings and you make a purity commitment to God that you're going to stay pure, i.e. not have sex with anybody until you get married. Okay, so that would be purity culture. And while that's not wrong, it absolutely is not wrong. God calls us to abstain from sexual activity until we were inside a covenant relationship with a man and a woman. One man, one woman in covenant. That is how God puts his check mark and his blessing on sex. Anything outside of that, whether it's homosexuality, whether it's whether it's sex outside of marriage, God is opposed to that. Okay?
Yeah.
However, we sometimes believe that if we wait until we get married, even if we've had other sexual relationships before, if we wait, then as soon as we get married, the sex is just going to be out of this world, unimaginable, the best thing we've ever had.
Yeah.
And I think for most people, again, There are the exceptions, but for most people, sex is a lot like riding a bicycle. The first time you ride it, it's going to be very uncomfortable, maybe even painful, and you're going to fall down. And the only way you're going to enjoy it is if you practice and get better at it. And so the one thing, purity, innocence, is I'm going to remain pure until I get married. But the second piece is purity, ignorance, is we're not going to talk about sex. We're not going to practice it after we get married. We're not going to have conversations. We're not going to get help if we need some help. If there's some sexual brokenness before, we're just going to assume everything works out okay. And then there's this idea that you expect things to be a certain way because you follow the rules. Like, I follow the rules, and so God should give me this. And that is treating your relationship with God like he owes you something, which he does not.
Yeah.
He doesn't owe us anything. And so I love this thought that we have got to engage in getting good at a skill, which it is. It's like we're getting to know each other. We're finding out things about each other in the same way that we wouldn't say, well, we should just automatically go to communicate.
It's like riding a bike. That can also get you pregnant.
Right. Right. Yeah, throw in pregnancy in there, and that's a whole nother wrench in that plan, right? Hormones and all kinds of things like that.
I mean, I like the thought, especially because you can be innocent or work towards innocence.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you have to be ignorant about what you're talking about what you're getting ready for.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
We spend so much time getting ready for weddings, so much money, time, resources, investment of everything. And then, but a lot of times we end up going into a marriage after having spent time and energy and resources on a wedding. We go into a marriage there's just not a lot to work with because we're ignorant of a lot of things. And some of them you can't learn, but some of them you can talk about and figure out and set expectations for, especially around sex and sexuality, because I love the great quote from the legendary seminary professor, Howard Hendricks. He said, we should not be ashamed to talk about that which God was not ashamed to create. Sex is God's idea.
Yep.
He dreamt it up. You can enjoy purity, and you can also experience and talk about and get ready for what's something that God has in store for you.
Yep.
That's wonderful.
Yep, that's great.
All right. Last one, or almost last. Next to last one.
Well, let's do the last one.
You want to do the last one?
I think we can spend some time talking about this one.
God did not create marriage to make me happy, but to make me holy.
Yeah. Well, and I want to go back to what we just talked about with this one, because if you pursue purity, that's not a bad thing, but I would say remain pure, but pursue holiness. Right? Because if I look at what Jesus did in pursuing holiness, everything that he gained, he gave that glory back to the Father. He didn't receive it for himself. Sometimes if we pursue purity, we put ourselves up on a pedestal, and it's almost like this prideful pedestal that we put ourselves on. I remain faithful. Within reality, did you never think an impure thought about somebody of the opposite sex?
Yeah.
Because the Bible says if you did, you're not pure. It's as if you committed that act. So anyway, we're going to pursue holiness, not pursue purity. We want to be pure, but when we pursue to be more like Jesus, that comes as a byproduct of it. Yeah. Okay, we talked about this last week. I think this is a good place for us to camp for a minute. Ephesians 5. And in the first part of Ephesians 5, and this is this answer to the question of God didn't create marriage to make me happy, but to make me holy. Okay. Paul gives instructions on how we should walk or how we should live and interact with each other. And he starts with this idea that we live in community, and then he goes into husbands and wives. And at the beginning of that section, sometimes we jump right into the husband and wives sections because it's sectioned off, but that's not how it was written. The letter was not sectioned off like this.
Right.
And he says right before we start the part about husbands and wives, he says that we give thanks always for everything to God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ.
Yeah.
So we submit back and forth to each other. And then he says this to wives. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. And then he jumps down in verse 31 and says, therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and I'm saying that it refers to Christ and the church. However, let each one of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. And there is a whole lot in this.
Just read, was that the whole Bible? Or just,
it was just a lot of it.
It was a lot.
It was Ephesians 5. It's kind of the last section. And so you can go and read the whole thing because, again, context is king, so read it all together as one. But this idea of submission, I won't say it's easy to live out, but it's easy to understand when you realize that ultimately you're submitting to the authority of Christ.
Sure.
You're not submitting to a person who is flawed. We all are flawed, but you're submitting to the authority of Christ. This is what Christ commands us to do. And so I think we oftentimes, again, going back to marriage, think of it as a contract, not a covenant. We talked about this in last week's episode just a minute ago. But when I submit to you, my husband, I'm playing the part of the bride of Christ, right? And I'm honoring you in that. And then you are honoring God when you love me, which is what the Bible commands you to do. Okay, so I submit to you. You love me like Christ loved the church. And ultimately, he laid down his life, right, for us. Now, there is also a second part of this, though, that I want to kind of camp out on, because at the very end, there's a different word that we're called to do as wives, and it's respect. So there's submission, and then there's respect, two different words. And I think this is huge for men, but I'll let you talk about this because I've never met a man who doesn't want to be respected. And if I think about it, I never met a woman who doesn't want to be loved. Deep down at the core of who she is, I think it's in our DNA, the way God made us. But it's interesting to me that your command is to love me, and my command is to respect you, and not like, I love you, you love me, or you respect me and I respect you. I don't think that you're not supposed to respect me and I'm not supposed to love you, but the commands are specific.
Yeah.
So why do you think those specific words are used?
I think verse 21, back up there, when you first started reading, it said, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. That's almost the umbrella under which some of these other concepts rest, because it's like submission to Christ is the goal. How that gets expressed and how we understand each other is maybe for you, I submit to you because I love you and I want to show you love. And that's how you will experience it. And then for me, it's respect, because if you submit to me by showing me respect, I will experience this value that I'm in that's almost the fruit of submitting to Christ. So both of us giving something to somebody else that you don't necessarily need yourself.
Right.
That's the way that the Spirit of God sanctifies us and helps us to grow in holiness.
Yeah.
Is when we humble ourselves to give somebody something that we don't necessarily need ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's one way. And I think, like, for, just the whole submit to your husband, respect for your husband type thing it's gone off the rails a bunch of different ways. I think we've complicated this thing by making it feel like, women should be barefoot and pregnant and in the house, and then the husband should be. That ain't what it is. And most of the time, the people that are like really advocating for, I'm the head of this household and I'm gonna put my foot down. They forget that if there was a boss at their job that showed up and they were like, "Hi, this is your new boss. I'm going to introduce you to your new boss. He is micromanaging. He's going to be very difficult to get along with. He's hard to please. He's demanding. He expects something from you that you can't give him. And when you can't give it to him, he's going to be grouchy at you." Nobody that worked in a place would be like, "Man, I'm so glad my boss is here."
Yeah.
Or on the other side of the coin, here's your new boss. He is untrained. He is undisciplined. He is lazy. He is prone to blowing up and fits of anger.
Yeah.
Enjoy his leadership.
Yeah.
So a lot of guys forget what good leadership is. That I mean, you ask any guy, what's a good boss? Somebody who shows up on time, somebody who's encouraging to you, somebody who trusts you, somebody who is able to say how much they appreciate you. I'd follow a person like that anywhere.
Yeah.
Everybody's able to articulate what a good boss is. We guys forget about it when we go in the house and we say, we're the head of this organization, but we forget about that. So that's part of that respect piece. If you want respect, everybody knows how to get it. It's just, are we going to be disciplined and open to do the work that it requires to earn it?
That's good. I love that. Well, and for me and for us as women, respect looks like really, if you would say, I don't, respect is something that my husband earns. I don't necessarily respect him, but I would say, and you've said this before, I've heard you say this, that you act your way into a feeling instead of feeling your way into an action.
Yeah.
You might not feel that way, but you can cultivate a heart of unconditional respect by affirming him where he's winning. By showing him appreciation for providing for your family. And I'm not saying that you might not make more money than he does, but I'm saying you show appreciation for the way he's providing. Even that's like simple, like, "Hey, thanks for helping with the dishes," or "Thanks for helping around the house," or whatever. Simple things like that. And then just affirming his masculinity. And that can be really in a sexual way. You can do that. You can initiate and you can respond to when he comes onto you sexually. That's just a real practical way.
I hear what you're
Can I get an amen?
I hear what you're laying down.
But here's what it does not look like. It does not mean following him into sin. Never, never. It does not mean criticizing him or feeling like you can't disagree. We disagree all the time. If you say something, it doesn't mean I say, "Oh, well, I can't disagree with what he's saying. I know that you value my opinion. You ask for that. And I can disagree with you on things." And then it doesn't mean rejecting you for your weakness. And we all have weaknesses. And I've said this before, I'll say this again. I would much rather be married to a man who goes down swinging than one that stands at the plate. And you are a man that goes down swinging, and I love that. You will swing at it. And so those are just some things that respect does and does not look like. But remember, wives, this idea as we wrap up today is that we submit to and respect our husbands as if we are doing it unto Christ. That this is what honors God. He gets the glory, and then we get the joy by walking in his commands, even when it's hard.
That's a good stopping point. Thank you so much for listening to Carl and Heather Present. Please email us at hi@carlandheather.com. Let us know how we can pray for you to keep walking this out with you. Being married is not easy, but it's worth it. Keep going. Don't ever be discouraged. We'll see you soon. Together on Purpose.
Together on Purpose.
It's